Keanu Reeves, a talented and ambitious actor, entered the Hollywood scene at a time when fame seemed to promise everything: wealth, status, and recognition. At first, it was exhilarating. The red carpets, the flashing cameras, the glittering lights, they were all part of a dream that every aspiring actor longed for. Keanu's breakout role in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure had already set him on a path to stardom. But it wasn't just his acting talent that had audiences hooked. His natural charisma and everyman quality made him instantly relatable to fans, even though he was rapidly becoming a household name. His roles in Speed and The Matrix solidified his status as a leading man in Hollywood. For a while, Keanu allowed himself to bask in the glow of success. He enjoyed the luxurious lifestyle that came with his fame: private jets, designer suits, high-end parties, and lavish dinners. He was admired, celebrated, and sought after by the media. For any other actor, this would have been the ultimate goal. Hollywood had promised him the world, and for a brief moment, it seemed like everything was aligning perfectly. However, as the glamorous world of fame continued to unfold around him, Keanu began to notice something that didn't quite add up. Beneath the shiny surface of red carpets and media attention, there was something far darker, a side of fame that was empty and unfulfilling. The media's obsession with image, the pressure to maintain a flawless public persona, and the constant scrutiny over his every move slowly began to take their toll. He had been told that fame would bring him happiness, but the more successful he became, the more he started to feel that something was missing, something that couldn't be bought or gained through recognition. This was the beginning of Keanu's awakening, a realization that fame, with all its promises of glory, might not be the key to a fulfilling life. And so, as the media's gaze grew ever more intense, Keanu started to look at fame through a different lens, one that would change the course of his career, his relationships, and ultimately, his very sense of self. As Keanu's career continued to skyrocket, so did the intensity of his fame. The bright lights of Hollywood that once seemed so alluring began to feel more like a burden. Paparazzi, once a minor nuisance, now followed him everywhere: outside restaurants, at the gym, even during casual walks in the park. At first, he tried to brush it off, but the constant flash of cameras and the endless questions from strangers began to wear on him. Every moment of his life was now public property. One afternoon, Keanu was leaving a meeting when a group of paparazzi swarmed him. They shouted questions about his personal life, his love interests, and his next big project. They crowded around him, blocking his path as he tried to make his way to his car. The noise, the chaos, it felt suffocating. Keanu, though always calm, could feel his frustration growing. Why couldn't he simply exist without being chased by cameras? The intrusive questions got personal. One photographer even called out, "Keanu, are you dating anyone right now? Is it someone famous? Are you seeing someone from Hollywood?" The questions, laced with assumptions and judgment, stung. Keanu knew that his privacy no longer belonged to him. He was no longer Keanu Reeves, the man with dreams, but Keanu Reeves, the public figure, someone whose life had been taken over by the relentless pursuit of fame. That evening, as he sat in his car, Keanu couldn't shake off the feeling that fame wasn't what it seemed. It was exhausting. There was no space for authenticity, only for what people wanted to see. He thought about how years ago he had wanted nothing more than to be seen as a respected actor. But now he realized he was just part of a circus, constantly performing for an audience that demanded more than he could give. It wasn't long before Keanu started noticing a deeper pattern. The public scrutiny wasn't limited to just him. It was the entire industry. People weren't celebrated for their talents anymore. They were valued for their image and how well they could sell a story. It was a world where people were reduced to their personas, where their true selves were masked by the expectations of the public. And in that moment, Keanu began to question, was all this attention really worth it? Could there ever be a way to truly be himself in a world that constantly demanded he wear a mask? As Keanu's career reached new heights, so did the pressure to maintain his public image. Hollywood, as glamorous as it seemed, was built on maintaining the perfect persona. The studio's agents and even fans expected Keanu to always be the same happy-go-lucky, heroic figure that the world had come to know. But the more he played that role, the more he felt like a character in his own life, forced to meet expectations that didn't align with who he was at his core. Every appearance, every interview, and even his social media presence were calculated. He was told how to smile, how to pose, what to wear, and even what to say. People didn't just want him to act in movies, they wanted him to embody the very ideal of a Hollywood star. He had become the face of good guy roles, the humble action star who saved the world on screen but was expected to maintain that persona in real life too. The pressure mounted as Keanu was constantly reminded by his agents and studios that his fame was a business, a product that needed to be protected, sold, and marketed. The more he achieved, the more he had to stay perfect, never letting the world see cracks in his carefully constructed image. Even in his personal life, he was expected to uphold a carefully curated persona, one that matched his on-screen identity, calm, composed, and always happy. Behind closed doors, Keanu began to feel suffocated. He was exhausted by the constant need to project perfection. There were days when he wanted to disconnect from it all, to leave the bright lights behind and just be a man, not a symbol. He found himself longing for peace, for quiet moments without cameras, without expectations, without the constant performance. The turning point came one night when Keanu attended an industry gala, filled with the who's who of Hollywood. Surrounded by glitz and glam, he realized he had become a mere product of the industry. People weren't interested in his ideas, his passions, or his personal thoughts. They only wanted to know about his next movie, his latest relationship, or the latest gossip surrounding him. He wasn't being treated like a person, he was being treated like a brand. The more Keanu observed, the more he realized the dark side of fame was invisibility, not in the sense of being unnoticed, but in losing the ability to be truly seen. He wasn't being recognized for his talents, his art, or his humanity. Instead, he was merely an extension of the machine that drove Hollywood forward. Keanu's frustration grew, and for the first time, he seriously questioned whether fame, in all its glory, was worth the cost of his true self. He had built a career and a reputation based on his talent, but now he had to decide, could he continue living in a world that demanded he be more than just a man, or was it time to step away from it all? Keanu's growing disillusionment with fame began to deepen as he spent more time in Hollywood's superficial world. He had always believed that the film industry was about telling great stories and creating art that resonated with people. But now, as he spent more time in the heart of it all, he saw the darker side of the industry, the one where image was everything and the substance often took a backseat. He watched as actors, producers, and directors went through the motions of shallow conversations, making deals not based on passion for film but on the profit they could generate. The meetings, the press conferences, the staged smiles for photos, they were all just performances designed to maintain a certain aesthetic for the cameras. Keanu's heart grew heavier as he realized the disconnect between what he believed in and what was valued in Hollywood. Many of the stars he admired seemed to be trapped in a web of fake relationships, shaking hands and smiling in public but feeling isolated and empty behind closed doors. The industry valued appearances more than authenticity. It wasn't about making movies that would change the world. It was about selling tickets, creating the next blockbuster. It wasn't about art. It was about advertising. During a series of interviews for one of his major films, Keanu felt like he was staring into the void. Journalists asked him the same questions over and over. What's your next project? Who are you dating? And what's your secret to staying humble? They didn't ask about the deeper motivations behind his work or the ideas he was passionate about. No one cared to understand who Keanu was beyond the image he had cultivated. On the inside, he was screaming for more than just the superficial questions, but on the outside, he gave the answers the press wanted to hear. Just staying grounded, he would say with a smile, carefully crafting a response that fit the public's expectations. The more he experienced this hollow world, the more he became convinced that fame had become something it was never meant to be, a prison of perfection, a cage built around an image that never truly reflected who he was. He began to feel like a puppet, with strings pulled by agents, publicists, and studios, all trying to make him fit into a mold that didn't represent his true self. The more he played along, the more he lost his sense of identity. He no longer recognized the man he saw in a mirror, as the public Keanu became a far cry from the private Keanu. At some point, he realized, this is not the life I signed up for. Fame had promised him excitement, opportunity, and recognition. But all it had given him was a shadow of himself, a hollow version of his true identity. This realization would become the turning point for Keanu, a moment where he would have to choose whether to continue playing the game of fame or to finally walk away from it all and reclaim the life he once dreamed of. One night, after an overwhelming media storm and a series of shallow interviews, Keanu sat in his quiet Los Angeles apartment, reflecting on his journey. The weight of his thoughts grew heavier with each passing moment. He gazed out of his window, the city lights sparkling below, but the view no longer felt magical. It felt suffocating. The bright lights of Hollywood seemed to mock him, each one a reminder of the superficiality he had come to resent. It wasn't just the press or the expectations from the public. It was everything. The constant performance. The need to always be on, to maintain a perfect image of himself for the world. The deeper he delved into fame, the more it felt like a trap. Keanu had lived his life based on honesty and authenticity, but Hollywood had a way of twisting those values into something unrecognizable. That night, he made a decision. He would step away from the chaotic machine that was Hollywood. He knew the world would be surprised, confused, and maybe even angry, but it no longer mattered to him. Keanu had reached a point where his personal peace was worth more than any paycheck or award. The next day, in a quiet and simple press conference, Keanu made his announcement. He stood at the podium, surrounded by cameras, but he felt like a stranger in his own life. With a calm, clear voice, he said, "I've spent a long time in this industry, and while I'm grateful for the opportunities, I've come to realize that this world of fame isn't what I want. I need to live for myself, not for the expectations of others. I'm stepping away from Hollywood to focus on the things that truly matter to me: peace, authenticity, and meaningful connections." The room fell silent. Reporters and photographers scrambled to process what they had just heard. Some were shocked, others skeptical. They had expected a different kind of announcement, one that would either promise a new project or announce his future plans. But this was different. It was bold, it was unexpected, and it was entirely Keanu. The press went wild, as expected. Headlines screamed about his retirement from Hollywood, and speculation ran rampant about what had caused the decision. Was he burnt out? Had he fallen out of love with acting? Keanu didn't respond to any of it. He didn't need to. His decision was not for the public, it was for himself. The story would unfold in its own way, but Keanu had already taken back the reins of his life. In the following weeks, Keanu disappeared from the public eye. No more red carpets, no more interviews, and no more being the face of Hollywood blockbusters. He spent his days quietly traveling, enjoying moments of solitude and reflection. He reconnected with old friends, volunteered in various charitable causes, and focused on his personal projects, ones that didn't require an audience or a spotlight. This was a new chapter in his life, one that didn't require the glitz and glamour of fame. Keanu Reeves, the man behind the actor, was free at last. And though the world was still in awe of the public figure he had been, it was in his private moments that Keanu found true peace. Keanu's decision to step away from the Hollywood machine wasn't just about seeking peace. It was about taking control of his own life. Hollywood, with its bright lights and carefully crafted personas, had a way of shaping people into products. Keanu had always been known for his humility and authenticity, but as he grew more successful, he realized that the industry demanded more than just his talents. It demanded his soul. The studios, his agents, and even the public had a very specific image of who Keanu was supposed to be. He was the humble hero, always composed, always charitable, always good-natured. This persona, while true to his character in many ways, began to feel like an ironsmith's mold. No matter how much of his true self Keanu showed, there was always a demand for more, the perfect image that could sell movies, merchandise, and more. The pressure was immense. Studios offered him lucrative deals, promising roles in big-budget films and blockbuster franchises. They told him that turning down these opportunities was unthinkable, but Keanu didn't see it that way. For him, the constant push to conform to the industry's expectations became suffocating. One of the most defining moments of his journey came when Keanu was offered the lead role in yet another franchise film. The pay was massive, the prestige even bigger. The world was ready to see him in a role that would only further cement his status as a global superstar. But Keanu, sitting in a meeting with the studio executives, realized something profound. This wasn't who he wanted to be anymore. With the weight of the decision hanging over him, Keanu leaned forward in his chair and politely declined the offer. His agents and the studio heads were stunned. "You're turning this down?" they asked incredulously. The opportunity was too big, too important to let go. But Keanu had already made up his mind. "I've done it all before," he explained, his voice calm but resolute. "I don't want to chase fame. I want to make work that matters, not work that's just about the next paycheck or the next project. I want to live on my own terms, not in someone else's idea of what I should be." There was silence in the room, as his words hung heavy in the air. The studio execs tried to convince him otherwise, but Keanu remained unmoved. He was done with trying to fit into a mold that wasn't his own. For Keanu, it wasn't about rejecting Hollywood. It was about rejecting the narrative the industry had tried to impose on him. He didn't want to be a product anymore. He wanted to be a person, a real person with agency over his own life. This was the beginning of a new era for Keanu. No longer would he chase after roles simply because they were lucrative. No longer would he allow the pressure of the industry to dictate his every move. He would choose roles that felt authentic to him, that spoke to his values, and allowed him to explore stories that could make a difference, no matter how big or small the projects were. Hollywood might have been the place where he gained fame, but Keanu was now ready to take the reins of his career and his life on his own terms. The movie industry, for all its glamour, had failed to offer him the one thing he truly desired: the freedom to live life without constantly performing for others. Keanu's decision to step away from the typical path of Hollywood stardom opened up an entirely new world for him, one where he could focus on what truly mattered: his personal happiness, his passions, and his desire to make a genuine impact. He began to seek projects that allowed him to grow as an artist, rather than just looking for roles that would add to his celebrity status. One of the first things Keanu did was take a break from acting altogether. He took the time to travel, to explore different parts of the world, and to rediscover the things that truly inspired him. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of freedom that had long been absent from his life. No paparazzi, no studio deadlines, just time for himself. During this period, Keanu also began to pursue his longtime interest in philosophy and spirituality. He started reading more books on Eastern philosophy, especially on Zen Buddhism and the Tao Te Ching. The quietness of these teachings helped him find peace of mind in a way that Hollywood had never been able to offer. Keanu's newfound freedom also led him to dive deeper into his philanthropic work. He had always quietly donated to charities and causes, but now he felt the urge to get even more involved in projects that mattered to him on a personal level. He worked with organizations dedicated to providing education to underprivileged children and supported causes focused on mental health awareness, something close to his heart after the struggles he had seen in the industry and in his own life. It wasn't just about being known for doing the right thing. It was about creating lasting change in areas that genuinely needed attention. Keanu started his own foundation to fund affordable housing, which he believed was essential to addressing the growing homelessness crisis in major cities. By focusing on these meaningful projects, Keanu found a sense of purpose that no Hollywood film could ever give him. Although Keanu had walked away from the mainstream film industry, he didn't completely shut the door on acting. He selectively chose roles that aligned with his personal values, stories that had depth, that challenged societal norms, or that had a message he believed in. For example, in his return to acting, he chose films that were less about box office numbers and more about telling authentic stories. He was no longer motivated by fame or financial gain. He wanted to create work that could contribute something of value to the world. This new chapter in Keanu's life was about more than just avoiding the pressures of fame. It was about finding a deeper connection to the world and to himself. For the first time, he felt like he was living rather than simply existing. And with every decision he made, he found more clarity about the kind of man he wanted to be. Not just a celebrity, but a real person who cared more about meaningful connections than anything Hollywood had to offer. Keanu Reeves had stepped away from the world that had made him famous, and in doing so, he found the peace and freedom he had long been seeking. His journey became a story of personal growth, of rejecting a life dictated by external pressures, and of embracing a path that was defined by authenticity, humility, and a sense of purpose. As Keanu continued on his newfound path, he started to value the importance of personal privacy more than ever before. The public had always been fascinated with his life, trying to uncover every detail, every secret, and every nuance of his personal world. But now Keanu realized that his privacy was one of the most valuable things he could hold on to. In the chaos of fame, his private moments had become rare, almost sacred. Keanu didn't just pull away from the spotlight for himself. He also started to speak out about the damaging culture of celebrity obsession. He began using his platform to shed light on how invasive the media could be and how toxic the constant scrutiny of personal lives could become. He didn't just want to protect his own space. He wanted to encourage others to respect boundaries and value privacy, not just for celebrities, but for all individuals. One afternoon, Keanu did an interview with a well-known journalist. It was an honest, reflective conversation about his career, his decision to step away, and his thoughts on privacy. But the journalist, eager to catch a glimpse of Keanu's personal life, pressed for more. They asked about his relationships, his family life, and his day-to-day routine. Keanu, calmly but firmly, responded, "I believe that everyone deserves the right to their privacy. Whether you're a public figure or not, your personal life should be something you own, not something that's for public consumption." This wasn't just a statement. It was a philosophy that Keanu had adopted for himself. He made it clear that he would no longer allow the media to invade his space or dictate how he lived his life. His decision to remain private was, in many ways, a political act, an act of defiance against a system that thrived on exploiting personal information. Keanu also became an advocate for others in the industry who were similarly exploited by the media. He used his voice to speak out on behalf of other celebrities who were constantly under fire, encouraging them to take control of their narratives. He shared stories of actors, musicians, and public figures who had suffered from mental health issues caused by relentless media pressure and public judgment. It wasn't just about protecting himself, it was about creating a culture of respect. Keanu advocated for boundaries and for respecting one another's space. He also shared the importance of self-care and maintaining balance in an increasingly demanding world. His words began to resonate with a generation of fans and fellow entertainers who were growing disillusioned with the toxic celebrity culture. Keanu's stance made a ripple effect, inspiring others to take a step back from the demands of fame and reevaluate their own relationships with privacy. Keanu's ability to maintain his personal space, his deep commitment to protecting his own mental well-being, and his willingness to speak out about the issue became a beacon of hope for many who felt lost in the noise of fame. As the years passed, Keanu Reeves' decision to step away from the glitz and glamour of Hollywood began to be seen as one of the most important cultural shifts in the entertainment industry. What Keanu had done wasn't just an act of personal liberation. It was a statement that authenticity and humility were more valuable than fame and fortune. His rejection of Hollywood's expectations became a model for those who were tired of the machine, and his example inspired a new wave of actors, musicians, and public figures to choose personal peace over industry-driven success. Keanu's influence extended beyond the big screen, where he had already become known for his roles in films like The Matrix and John Wick. He became a symbol for those who wanted to live by their own rules, unapologetically carving out a life that wasn't defined by the public's gaze. His authenticity gave others the courage to ask themselves whether the world they were chasing was truly fulfilling or just a performance. As Keanu quietly continued his work, choosing smaller, more meaningful projects over high-paying blockbuster roles, people began to see him for what he truly was, a man who had never lost sight of his own humanity. While others continued to chase the spotlight, Keanu embraced a life that felt true to him, full of meaningful relationships, quiet reflection, and the pursuit of genuine happiness. Through his charity work and commitment to improving the lives of others, Keanu created a legacy that would last far beyond his movies. He became known not just for his acting, but for his philanthropy, particularly in areas related to mental health, homelessness, and education. He spent years working behind the scenes, quietly funding various initiatives that focused on social justice and helping the underprivileged. By the time Keanu turned 60, his legacy was clear. He had outlived the transient fame of Hollywood, transcended the expectations of his industry, and built a life based on real values: love, peace, kindness, and respect. He was no longer just an actor. He was a visionary, a role model, and a true symbol of humanity in the face of fame. Even as the world continued to change, Keanu stayed true to his core values. His absence from the Hollywood spotlight wasn't an end, but a new beginning for him and for the many people who looked up to him as an example of what it meant to live authentically. His journey reminded everyone that, in the end, it's not about how many awards you collect or how famous you become, but about the kind of person you are when the cameras are off. Keanu Reeves' life story would be remembered not just for his incredible body of work in film, but for the courage he had to choose a life of substance over fame. His legacy would always be one of integrity, humility, and the unwavering belief that true happiness comes from living on your own terms.